Hello and welcome to Safe House, Safe Talk. We are on episode number 3. I hope that you guys have enjoyed it thus far. Tonight I have a guest speaker for you guys. She is a great friend, an amazing person, wonderful volunteer, and also a survivor. And she is here tonight with us to talk to us about her story, how she overcame domestic violence, and also she's going to share with us a little bit, or maybe a lot of bits, of her online workshop that's titled The Audacity to Survive. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce to you to my friend Tiffany Frazier. You guys are more than welcome to write down any questions or comments. She will go ahead and answer them as we go along. So, here she is, and enjoy, Tiffany.
Right. So thank you so much, Monica, for having me. Thank you, Safe House, as well, for having me to be a guest speaker for your live sessions. I really do appreciate that. Like Monica said, my name is Tiffany Frazier, and I am a survivor of domestic violence, abuse in general. So I'll just share a little backstory about my testimony of survival. So it started when I was in about the first grade. I was sexually abused by a family member. So I experienced what they call incest, which is when there's inappropriate touching by somebody that's in the intermediate family or that's blood related, versus molestation usually takes place when it's somebody that's outside of the bloodline or outside of the family. Could be a coach, clergy, whatever. But I did experience sexual abuse by a family member from the time I was about the first grade to about my fourth, fifth grade year in elementary school. And so that really affected me mentally, emotionally. I remember not only was I sexually abused, but it was almost like a bullying context too, as well with this individual. And so I remember being a little girl, being confused, being angry, being or having very low self esteem. And so when I was in the eighth grade, I met a young man and we got into a relationship. And it was actually about the end of my eighth grade year, going into a freshman in high school. And so I always tell people what looked like control for somebody else, it looked like attention to me, because I did have low self esteem and I was not confident in myself. So that's why I always tell people, or tell parents, to definitely have conversations with your children. It's important to find out what's going on with them, because not to fault my parents or anything, but we just didn't have those type of conversations about, what is a healthy relationship or anything like that. So I didn't necessarily recognize the red flags as a adolescent, as a youth. And so, it started off with the isolation, because I know a lot of times when people look at the media, they look at the physical scars and things like that, and that's their picture and that's their image of intimate partner violence or domestic violence. But it started off with the isolation. So, he wanted me around all the time. And for me, somebody wanting that type of love and that type of attention, it was cute to me at first, until it got to the point where he wanted to control my every move. He wanted to control what I would wear, and then it kind of transitioned to the verbal and the mental abuse. The physical abuse didn't really start until about a year after, or a year and a half after the relationship, and I ended up being with this individual for 7 years. So about my junior year in college is when the relationship ended. And even though I was out of it mentally, I mean, physically, mentally, I was still in a cage. So I dealt with low self esteem. I was depressed, suicidal. I became addicted to prescription pain pills, Percocets in particular. I was a functioning alcoholic on my way to being a full time alcoholic because in my mind I just wanted to just really numb the pain. Not only that, but it just seemed like abuse was just my norm. I was raped, actually gang raped in high school. Um, I was raped again by a young man who I was dating after the relationship that I got out of the abusive relationship. And so it just seemed like, abuse was just like me. So I didn't really understand what a healthy relationship really was. And so it really took for me to um, go through services, well, counseling, my spiritual leaders. It took for me engaging in what I talked about in my workshop in terms of resilience. It took for that for me to stand here before you today and tell you that I am a woman of resilience. I survived. I'm here. I'm triumph. I'm in my right mind. And so that's just a little bit of my background, my testimony. So I am an advocate at heart. And so I always tell people that I can come to it from a dual perspective, that I am an advocate, but most of all, my passion is the fact that I am a survivor. And I wanted to give other young girls the opportunities that I didn't have because when I was going through, I didn't really have that outlet. Nobody really understood what domestic violence was. Nobody really, in my close circle, they didn't understand what it was. And so they really didn't know how to help me. And so in my workshop, I have a virtual workshop and it's called the Audacity to Survive. And so I'm basically talking about resilience and utilizing holistic tools such as art expression to take your clients or anybody who has dealt with abuse from vicarious trauma to vicarious resilience. And so when you think about resilience, so resilience, my personal definition is basically when there's an internal mobilization of a person's skills, their character traits, um, their abilities to be able to face adversity or triumph or adopt healthy coping mechanisms in any negative or adverse condition or situation. And so that was really the topic of my workshop. One of my favorite quotes for resilience is that when you're able to bend with the wind but don't break in the storm. And so, in essence, when I'm talking about resilience, it's really about utilizing your internal skills to be able to cope in any circumstance. And what I love about resilience in my research is that, research says that resilience is dynamic, meaning that certain situations, like for example, somebody can be resilient in their finances, right? But not necessarily resilient in their relationships. Um, it can also be developed. And when we talk about developed, it's like resilience isn't just reserved for like the elite or some special class. Like anybody can be resilient as long as you're able to adopt and develop your internal assets. So that's really what resilience is. It's really about adapting or developing your internal assets to adapt in any circumstance, in any situation. And so I talked about utilizing that with art expression. And the reason why I talked about resilience and the anatomy of resilience is because these are the actual strategies or tactics or coping mechanisms that I utilize to help me get through my trauma, to be able to stand before you, tell you that I am a woman of resilience today. So basically, when it comes to resilience, we talked about the anatomy in my workshop. I talked about the anatomy of resilience. So that's your social support, spirituality, physical wellness. Let me actually just look at it so I don't forget. But the anatomy of resilience in my research is social support, spirituality, self conceptualization, cultural influence and identity, physical wellness, and economic stability. In my online workshop that I recently presented, I only particularly focused on four, and that was social support, spirituality, your physical wellness, and your self conceptualization. And so I talked about art expression because for me, or just in my overall research, like art in itself is a universal language. It can speak to so many people from radical backgrounds, and we can have an understanding of each other. I mean, if you think about even the Egyptians, we learned a lot about their culture from their language and hieroglyphics. Those were pictures. So we got to get an understanding of their lifestyle. And so what I've learned is that through utilizing art expression is that it helps your individuals to be able to have more confidence in openly expressing themselves. It brings more light to your own emotional regulation and awareness. And so that was really the focus on the workshop. The four individuals that we focused on, like I said, the first one was your self conceptualization, which for me, this was a biggie for me um, because, like I said, I dealt with low self esteem. My perception of myself was not in a good light, and so when it comes to self conceptualization, it's one of my favorite quotes that Adam Grant, he has this book called The Original. And so when I was reading, this quote like really stuck out to me. And it says that we are constantly borrowing thoughts, whether intentionally or inadvertently. We're all vulnerable to kleptomnesia, accidentally remembering the ideas of others as our own. And I can just remember from my own story of allowing the perpetrator or the abuser, the words that he spoke to me, the words that he spoke over me, like it was almost like a mental replay button in my head. And so for me, when it comes to self conceptualization and resilience and art expression, um, you utilize that to help individuals or help your clients find what I call their voice. And so when I talk about the voice, it literally is allowing your clients or the community that you serve to have that safe space and that autonomy to be able to disassociate those previous interpretations of their circumstances or the stressors or their trauma and giving them that control or giving them that space to where they can define their situations from a new perspective and a new perception. So, for example, one of the things that I did in my virtual workshop was an activity called metamorphosis, and so in that. Um, I had everybody do a breathing technique, and then I shared a scenario where you literally had to imagine yourself as a butterfly coming out of the cocoon for the first time in the same very forest that you were once a caterpillar in. So you're allowing to see the same space, the same environment, but from a different perspective because now you're a butterfly, right? And so that's what that was the activity that we did. But that's an example of how you can utilize art expression to be able to get individuals to kind of see themselves in a different light. And that's really the beginning of it. Because in that, what it does is going back to that bridge of art expression and resilience, is that you're giving those individuals that ability to have that emotional self regulation. Because sometimes when it comes to verbal expression, for some people it's just hard, especially when you've dealt with that type of adverse trauma. Some people not they don't necessarily know that they're dealing with depression. I didn't know that I was dealing with depression. I didn't know that I was dealing with suicidal. I know I didn't want to be here, but I didn't know the extent or I didn't really understand the trauma that I was dealing with. And so for some people, sometimes they need to dump it out somewhere. And sometimes they just can't verbally express it. So if you give them that platform, they're able to do it. And like I said, it gives them that ability to have that emotional awareness and that emotional regulation. And it also it gives somebody that ability to what I call is influence their outcomes. Instead of just being a passive bystander of their trauma, they actually have that autonomy to say, you know what, I can see myself and I have this free space to be assertive in how I want to see myself, And so that's really when it comes to that self conceptualization, using art expressions to be able to allow your people, allow your clients, allow your community to really to find your voice. I know I found mine. So
How did you know that that this was your way through your healing journey? I mean, so many people, you know, everybody has a healing journey, and it's just like you found your niche for your healing
yeah.
in through your healing journey. How did you realize, okay, so this is it? This is what is gonna help me heal.
Yeah. For me, it was like that. I saw the change in myself. I saw the change in how I looked at myself, um, and just being able to be brave enough to experience new things for me. Um, self, with, for example, with self conceptualization, I started using affirmations. And so that's another tactic or a strategy. Every day I would wake up and I would say, I am confident, I'm bold, I'm beautiful, and I would write it down. Or if I wanted to journal it so I can go back and just use it as a reference point when I had those moments of vulnerability. And that's really what resilience is all about. It's about teaching people or allowing people to develop these internal assets in a way where they decrease their vulnerabilities and they increase their adaptability so that they can come out triumph. And so for me, it was utilizing like those coping mechanisms, those positive ones instead of the maladaptive ones. The alcohol wasn't working. The prescription pills wasn't working because it was just like a placebo effect. I woke up the next day with the same results, the same feeling. So I just knew, I was like, this isn't working. And sometimes it's just like I just got tired. I was like, I have to try something different. And so that's where I was like, okay, I need to explore to see what will work for me. And like I said, I knew that I was on my way because the old things that used to trigger me back into the depression, back into the anger, it didn't work anymore. So for me, the way that I thought about myself and really having that place to redefine how I saw myself, it worked because now I can sit up here and say that I am confident and bold, but I love myself. And that's really what a lot of times we have to focus on when somebody's been through that type of trauma. You have to get them in this place where they can learn to truly love themselves internally again. And that's really what it's all about when it comes to that.
Right. I mean, we've said it over and over again. One of the things that you lose, as a survivor or as a victim, is your identity. Is the love that you have for yourself. You no longer know who you are.
Right.
So one of the things that I always talk about is gaining that empowerment back, and become we're just understanding and who you are and what color, what's your favorite color, what eggs do you like. So absolutely,
that's so it's interesting you just said that because up until recently I didn't even know what my favorite color was. For all of my life, I allowed people to tell me, no, this should be your favorite color. This is what you should like. This is what you should do. This is where you should go. And it was just like, for the first time, like in 2020, I was like, my favorite color is green. And for somebody that may seem so like simplistic, but when you've been controlled most of your life and in most of your relationships, for you to find that space to say, I like the color green, and it's my favorite color and I can wear it with the confidence and knowing like, yeah, I can do this. So, it's liberating for me. And I can attest to that. And so that's really the importance of having that identity, knowing who you are. And I know for so many people like myself who have been through that, that's a place where it's a lot of struggle in that, but I'm telling you the tactics that I use, the affirmations, the expressions, the meditation, the breathing routines, those things actually worked for me. And like I said, I wouldn't tell anybody to do anything that I haven't done myself. So, um, yeah. So self conceptualization. I also talked about social support. And I always tell people when it comes to social support, it's quality versus quantity. Relationships are so important. We as humans we were built for relationships. We were divinely orchestrated to have relationships with one another, not just in terms of husband, wife, spouse, partner, and things like that, but family, friends, business partners, and things like that. And so while your social support relationships are so valuable, they're also volatile. And I'll use this example that I always use. The love of a parent speaks a different volume to somebody who's experienced the abuse of a parent. And so we have to realize that the relationships that we've surrounded ourselves in, the relationships that we surround ourselves in, even now, they influence us. And so it's important that when it comes to resilience, that your clients are surrounded or they're placed with the right social support. So whether it's a non-abusive spouse or partner, family, friends, your servicing agencies, places like that. Those things matter. And what they found is that when it comes to social support, especially amongst adolescents, so like I said, I went through this at my age. What they have found is that those individuals who surround themselves with a social network that is outside of their family, they are more likely to be open in expressing themselves. It's been linked with a decrease in depression and things like that. And so those things matter. And so one of the examples that I use was that I am actually a certified Do You facilitator with a certificate that I got from the Action Alliance in Virginia. So what this allows me to do is to utilize art expression for youth between the ages of 13 to 16, and it teaches them how to be resilient. We're basically teaching them youth resilience so that they can be taught how to recognize what a healthy relationship is and also how to adapt healthy coping mechanisms to be able to thrive or to be resilient even if they get into a negative relationship.
I'm so glad that you said that, because I mean, when we're talking about our young, our teens and our young adults, one of the things that is really hard is the fact to understand unhealthy versus healthy relationships. Right. Because like you said in the beginning, when they're just looking at my phone, because they love me, or they're just they're being jealous because they love me. And I mean, honestly, they're young, and it's like, well, what do about love? But obviously they feel something.
They feel right.
But it's a matter of, do they know whether it's healthy or unhealthy?
Exactly.
And that's awesome that you do that, because it's very important to teach, especially our young adults,
right,
the difference between a healthy and unhealthy relationship. I mean, I had my childhood was, there was abuse in the home, and my father was very strict. And then obviously in my marriage, it was hard as well. So that was the norm to me. I speak loud. Well, I'm from Italy. I don't even know if I can speak anything other than loud. So once you have to try and understand like who you are and what is the norm. I mean, the way, like you said, all you knew was the abuse, because that's the relationships that you've had throughout your life.
Right.
So then all of a sudden we get into adulthood, and we're like, okay, now what do we do? And so I'm glad that you do that, especially for young, for teenagers and young adults, because it's so important. And it's so much easier to understand when you're young than when you get, into like my age. So
exactly. I say if you can mold them young to get them to understand the difference between unhealthy and healthy, then they're more prone to recognize that, and also they're more prone to talk as well. And so I think like in this generation, there's so much pressure on them. I mean, I recently had a friend, 26 years old. He just had a birthday a couple weeks ago, and he committed suicide 2 days later. And it was just heartbreaking for me because we didn't know that he was going through all of these things, and it just really, pushed me. And even though it wasn't as a result of abuse, suicide is something that those individuals like myself who've been through it, like that we've struggled with. And so I remember just having this mentality that because I'm a black woman, you know, culturally we were taught that you just put your big girl panties on, you suck it up, and you deal with it. And I always call it the strong black woman syndrome. So I didn't necessarily know how to openly express myself going through this because honestly I was ashamed and I was embarrassed because in my mind this doesn't happen to us, and I'm just being very candid and honest with y'all. But I just didn't think that this was supposed to happen to me. So it was very hard for me to express myself, and that's why I'm so passionate about opening up the platform for the youth to be able to express themselves. And that's why when it comes to your social support is so important, because what it has shown is that it increases that empathy, having that understanding. If I can have an understanding, especially through some form of art expression, then I'm more prone to say, hey, I may not have necessarily been in your shoes, but I understand the rejection that you're dealing with. I know what it feels like to be lonely. I know what it feels like to have those thoughts of, I don't want to be here anymore. And so that is definitely the importance and the value of surrounding yourself with the right relationships. And I always say that surrounding yourself with new, undefined relationships, it actually gives somebody the ability to create memories, create new experiences, and it gives them that positive outlook on life, And so, yeah, that's important. And we also, I talk about spirituality as well in my workshop. And when it comes to spirituality, I know for me, this was one of my defining moments in my life. And when it comes to resilience, the real objective is to really to get individuals to realign their core values or realign themselves, not based on their trauma, but based on what their religion or what their higher power, defines them, or tells them that they could be. I know for me, like I said, I dealt with the strong black woman syndrome, and research has shown that, especially in my community, that we are more prone to go to our spiritual leaders.
Yes.
Over servicing agents. And I remember going to my spiritual leaders and them not necessarily having an answer. So I felt lost. I felt stuck. And so in that, I had to realign my values to understand that I was loved, and that I was still here for a higher purpose. And that in that God loves me no matter what. Because for a long time in my life, I didn't think that I was loved even by my creator. And so it was just very hard for me to understand the concept. But once I really got into the nature of my spirituality, my relationship with God, Jesus, that's my belief system, then it really allowed me to see myself in a different perspective. And so even when it comes to our adolescents, I know I keep going back to that, but I'm so passionate about our youth, because they really need, in the pressures that they have today, they do need that. But I just know that even though the research is scarce in terms of spirituality and resilience, what they have found is that when it comes to adolescence, there is some type of correlation. There's some type of connection in terms of those who attend their religious affiliations on a regular, and a decrease in depression and more positive outlook on life. And so one of the tactics that, suggestions that I used was prayer. Prayer is universal. Almost every religion utilizes some form of prayer and meditation, of communication. And so that's just the core of what we talked about in spirituality. And last but not least, I talked about physical wellness. And for me, this was definitely a pivotal turning point in my life. I know me and my husband, we were at the track the other day, and one of the girls, we were running, and I only did like 1.6 miles, but there were two women out there, and they talked to us, and they was like, "Man, y'all ran nonstop," and I was like, "Thank you." And we are like, "This is a light day," but then it just really brought me back to the very fact that I remember when I couldn't even walk halfway around the track without being out of breath. And so for me, physical wellness, eating the right foods, making sure that I was hydrated, and that physical activity was very important for me. And actually, research has shown that the same parts of the body are activated when you're engaged in physical activity, when there's some type of, like, if you're exposed to some type of external threat, those same functions are activated when you're working out. So physical wellness has been associated, even though the research has been a little scarce on that too, but it has been associated with helping somebody build resilience. But I know for me, it actually helped me to set milestones, goal setting. I remember, like, when I was walking around the track, I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to run halfway around the track. And I ran halfway around the track. And I was like, okay, next week I'm going to try to run the whole track one time. And then that, became my milestone. Every time I went to the track, I was like, I'm not gonna stop until I run at least one. And then it just progressed to the point that now I can run 4 miles around the track. So I went from not being able to run at all to running 4 miles. But it's just to use that as an example, how physical wellness, how it helps an individual to
absolutely,
be
and
resilient.
that's a form of
Self-care.
We talk about that all the time.
Yeah.
Self-care is very important.
Yeah.
Specifically in our demographic and with what we deal with. So, no, that's great points that you brought up, and I really appreciate that, because it is, it is all about raising awareness, and it is about what can we do not only in our healing journey, but somebody that we know or somebody that we care about. What is it that we can provide for them? Tools. I always look at like tools. What tools can we give? So we are. Oh, I apologize. We are actually over time.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
But that's okay. So if anyone, so Tiffany, are there any upcoming workshops or that we can share with our viewers?
Yes, so I am actually in the midst of planning a workshop on the entire anatomy of resilience, based on the feedback that I got from the recent workshop that I did. People wanted more, so I'm going to give them more. I'm not finished, but the updates will be coming in the next month.
Okay, so just keep us posted. We would love to share that.
I will keep you posted, and so definitely.
So if anyone would like to reach out to Tiffany, would you mind sharing some contact information?
Sure. So I'll share my telephone number and my email address and my Facebook. So my telephone number is 804-402-3826. That is a Virginia number. I am originally from Richmond, Virginia. I am a rookie here in Las Vegas, Nevada. But it's 804-402-3826. And my email address, it's Tiffany, TIFFANY .Frazier, and that's FRAZIER 0918 @gmail.com. So Tiffany.Frazier 0918 @gmail.com. I'm also on Facebook. You can look me up. It's just Tiffany Frazier on Facebook as well. And I will be actually coming out with a website as well in the next month. And I am working on that as we speak. So those updates will be coming soon. But for right now, that's the basic contact information for me.
And we'll go ahead and post everything on our Facebook page for everyone who was not able to join us tonight. So, Tiffany, huge thank you for
You're
sharing your story,
No
for
problem.
sharing your
Anytime.
workshop. It's amazing how far you've come, and know that you're loved. And you are loved out there as well.
Yes.
Please join us next Tuesday. We will have another guest speaker. I hope that you enjoyed it, and please let us know if you have any comments, questions, or concerns. If not, safe house, safe talk. Good night.
Good night.